This weekend on the original Rochester Press Box.
I'm Luke Adam of the Rochester Americans, and I'm picking the Kansas City Royals to win the World Series.
I'm Dan Fetes for the Vision High School Sports Beat. The Buffalo Sabres are rebuilding, but what their fans can take away from the Chicago Cub faithful.
And I'm Mike Catalana. It pains me to say, but the Cowboys are still America's team.
I'm Bill Pucko. Has the Heisman ever meant less? Join us this weekend on the original Rochester Press Box. Hello, everyone, and welcome into the original Rochester Press Box. I'm Bill Pucko, being joined this week by Dan Fetes, who is substituting for John DeTullio, who's a late scratch for the show this week. Danny, welcome back.
Big shoes to fill.
High school sports beat and doing some graveyard shift work at WHAM, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Very good. Mike Catalana, 13 WHAM News.
Good to be back.
Always a pleasure, and it is a real pleasure to welcome in Luke Adam, the Rochester Americans left winger, one of their real cornerstones of this year's team. Welcome, and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Let's talk hockey first. We had the whole Trevor Gillies situation.
However, that's whistled down offside, and now we have McKenzie, and this time they're going to drop the gloves. Now you got somebody else comes in. Gillies, I don't think he's been on the ice yet tonight. He comes in and bumps. Now Gillies is going to get tied up, and he starts throwing some left hands. And who's he? Oh, he's slamming the Amerks player head to the ice. Who was that?
Larson, I think, wasn't it?
Mike.
Carrier.
It's Carrier. There's Larson standing
Carrier.
there. And over in the corner again, a original fisticuff started with McKenzie mixing it up with Seeloff, I think it was. And
He beats up on one of your guys. He gets a 12-game suspension. It's a pretty serious offense. More, it seems like this is being taken out of the game of hockey. Do you feel that's happening, and is it a good thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good thing. It's disappointing to see what happened. I mean, obviously, William was playing his first professional game, and a 20-year-old kid, and a guy like Gillies has been around the league. He's in his 30s now, and he's, that's how he's made his money is, unfortunately, having to fight every night. But there's a time and a place, and the way he went about it was just, it's too bad, and it's disrespectful to the game and to basically everyone, that was there. So
What's
it's
the
just too
reaction of
bad.
the teammates when that happens? As it happens, how are you guys reacting to it?
It's frustrating. I mean, I was on the bench at the time, and basically Willie was defenseless there, and couldn't really do much. So it's just disappointing. It really is. A guy that's played that many years in professional hockey, you think would have a little bit more respect for a young kid like that. It'd be different if he did that to another willing combatant or another fighter even. But a kid playing his first game, and I don't know if we'll see him fight all year, and that happens to him. It's just really disappointing.
Yeah, that's what really frustrated me watching it, because you see, at times, like you said, willing combatant. I mean, we all know, and I always stick up for that part of your game where you say, look, it's two guys who know this is what they're going to do, they go at it. But not only did he go after him, he's going after him basically when he's down on the ice and the shots. I just think that's the kind of thing. It's really surprising from a guy who knows his role like that.
Yeah, it's just, and the most disappointing thing about it, I think, was where he picked him up at the end there and kind of threw him into the ice. I mean, there's no time or place for that, regardless of the guy was willing or not. So it's just too bad.
And that's the big difference. I think people want to get rid of fighting. I think fighting has its place. Two guys at the face-off circle saying, look, let's do this. My team wants to get pumped up. Your team wants to get pumped up. That was an ambush. I mean, that's just beating up on a defenseless player. There's no room for that in the game, but I still think that there's a need. I mean, you're in the game. I think that there are positive things that come out of it for team-wise. I think there needs to be fighting in hockey, but not ambushing somebody that...
Yeah, I feel it's eroding. It used to be the hardcore hockey fan and the players themselves that say, it's an integral element of the game. I feel it eroding as people are losing support for the whole fighting aspect.
Yeah, publicly I think it's it's starting to lose its feel, but I don't think the game of professional hockey for sure could be played without fighting. There's just the game would be a lot chippier, a lot dirtier without it. It definitely keeps guys in the right place. I mean, you're not going to go run a guy over from behind knowing that there's going to be a guy coming over your shoulder if there's fighting. But if you know there's not fighting, then you might see a little bit more dirty, maybe even more suspensions. So it's a fine line, but I still think there is a place and a time for it.
Well, isn't it like throwing at a batter in baseball? I mean,
we could get into that.
I'm just saying, is there a reason for it? It's to keep guys in line. Like you said, you hit our guy, we're going to beam you back.
Yeah,
there's a right and a wrong way to do it.
It brings respect to the game. I mean, hockey, any professional sport, there's so much respect that needs to be had between teammates, between opponents, and having fighting in there. That I think, I'm not saying. I mean, I've been in one fight, and this is my 5th year pro. So I mean, I'm not a fighter, but I still think it needs to be there.
And the crowd usually stays silent during the fights.
Yeah. Such a dead point.
Yeah.
All righty, the football segment. The Bills are hosting the Vikings this week. We'll discuss that next when the original Rochester Press Box continues. Welcome back to the original Rochester Press Box football segment. The Bills are hosting the Minnesota Vikings. Bills giving 4.5 points. Michael, you're our football guy. How's that sound to you?
Yeah, I think the Bills will bounce back in this game. They need it. And one thing I've heard people say, well, after they beat Minnesota, look, settle down here a little bit. The Bills are not good enough to take anyone for granted. I don't care how poorly Minnesota played last week. They got a rookie quarterback in Bridgewater who has had a few spots where he's looked good and other times where he's looked terrible. The Bills are 3-3. Season is not over yet. Big disappointment with the way things went in the second half last week, but I do think they'll bounce back. I think maybe a little bit of a slow start and then get going. I think they'll win by about 10. I'll say 24-14.
All righty. What do you think, Luke? Are you invested? I mean, you're part of now the Western New York professional sports scene. Are you invested in the Bills at all?
Yeah, I like the Bills. I enjoy watching them. I'm a Lions fan, but
right across the board, Detroit.
Oh yeah, but. Next up, definitely the Bills. And Detroit actually played Minnesota last week, and I don't think Detroit played very well, but their defense played well, and they handled them pretty easily. But Minnesota's, we're saying, they're going to come back, and I think they're going to be a lot harder to play against after a loss like that last week. So I'm picking the Bills, too.
His boss owns the Bills now.
Yeah. It's Bills fan by association.
Yeah, that's it. We know where our bread is buttered.
Yeah, exactly.
All righty, so we got 2 picks from Buffalo. Dan, you're up.
Yeah, we're all on the Bills here. I think that they're going to bounce back. I was more impressed by the growth of the young receiving core and how this offense is transformed with Kyle Orton. I mean, you looked at Robert Woods, he stepped up. Whoever was dressing for Scott Chandler in his uniform had a dominant game. And you looked at, Chris Hogan even stepped up, even when Sammy Watkins was covered by Revis Island. So you looked at going forward. I like them. The offense has to click, or the defense has to click back into what they're made of. And 24-10, Bills win.
All right, Danny's picking for DeTulio. He's the only one above 500 against the points. It's a 2-game lead over the Crew, which is also taking the Bills. So I feel especially good to be on the other side of this thing.
Wow.
I'm taking the Vikings. And the only thing I'll say about that is I heard from a Vegas guy on the radio that said the teams that lose by 30 or more points the previous week cover 70% of the time the following week. Now, I don't know what the margin was, the Detroit-Minnesota game, but I know Minnesota played horrible.
Yeah.
Well, I'm lumping them into that, and I think Minnesota makes a bounce back. Secondary picks. Mike, who do you like the rest of the schedule?
All right, I'm taking the Giants again. Now, I took them last week against the Eagles, and, well, while I wasn't upset, the Giants were awful. But they were awful in that game. I don't think they're that bad. And Dallas has now been crowned as the team in the league, and they played phenomenally well at Seattle. But I just see this being a close NFC East game. I think the Giants were embarrassed, and I think it's always good to be on the side of a team that has talent that was embarrassed the week before. So I'm going to take the Giants getting the points.
All righty. You were on the Giants game last week too, right?
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
Luke, what do you like?
I'm taking my Lions at home versus New Orleans. They gave the Bills one a couple weeks ago, so hopefully we don't see that happen again at home. But I'm picking the Lions.
I think the Lions are one of the toughest teams to get a handle on this year. Is just how good they are. Because sometimes they look like they're among the best in the league, and other times they're very ordinary.
I think they've looked like that for about 3 or 4 years now. So hopefully they can figure it out. New coach in there, he seems to be doing a good job, and hopefully continue to play well.
Danny, who do you like?
Yeah, the hockey boys are both picking the Lions there. I got to go with it. And like you said, I think the Lions need to start winning games when they're supposed to. They should have beat the Bills at home. They didn't. They need to beat the Vikings at home here.
Danny played high school hockey. Does that qualify him as a hockey
Oh,
boy?
yeah, for sure.
I got a state title. I got a state title.
Exactly. He's
Just
got the
making
bragging
sure.
rights.
That's it.
The crew likes the Colts -3 against the Bengals. That's a good game. And my secondary pick, I like the Bears giving 3.5 to the Miami Dolphins. There we go. That's the week in the NFL. I'm 3-9, so you can pretty much dismiss whatever I have to say.
I better
Like
win.
it or not, when we return.
And you don't need to be Native American to realize it is offensive. And it's not politically correct. It's the right thing to do.
He was an idiot for throwing him that pitch. The guy's phenomenal. He had no reason to give him anything, especially a fastball to hit.
It's simply that these two guys, Ronaldo and Tom Brady, are too good looking.
I like it, just don't admit to it.
Everybody wants to hate on the best in the world. You know, he's here to stay, and he wants to build something big time.
The bottom line is, still nobody's going to like A-Rod.
Welcome back to the original Rochester Press Box. It is our pleasure to have Luke Adam with us here for the Rochester Americans as our special guest. Mike, you brought this up before, so like it or not, the Dallas Cowboys winning, good for the NFL.
Oh, I definitely think it's good for the NFL. We've gotten to the point where the narrative has been Dallas is going to fall apart, they're going to be in the middle of the pack, and they'll be that way. I think the higher up they go, or at least stay in contention, people love it because they are the Cowboys. And while they have a big fan base, they have a lot of people who dislike them as well, which makes them a rare team. So I think it's good for the NFL when they are relevant, and they're very relevant this year.
Is it like the Yankees and the Lakers? I mean, do you lump those teams into the same
why
bag?
not? Because again, the pluses and the minuses are there, and I think that's what makes them the team that a lot of people love to hate.
Luke, like it or not, Ted Nolan comes out and calls the Sabres a peewee team after their play, I think, and it was in their second game. Like it or not when a guy does something like that?
I mean, I'm sure what he said to the media, he said to the team inside the dressing room as well. So, I mean, if you look at it like that, I mean, he's not out telling the media something. I've been with Ted, and he's a very straight shooter, and whatever he says to the media, he's telling the guys the exact same thing inside the closed doors. So, it didn't come to a surprise with them. I'm sure no one on that team was happy with their performance and happy how the game went. And obviously he's trying to motivate, but he was obviously frustrated, and it's not motivation through the media. Like I said, he's saying the same thing to the team inside closed doors. So, that's his coach's job.
You ever get called out publicly, and what's that do for you? Do you play better as a result?
I mean, I'm sure there's definitely more motivation behind it if you get called out publicly. You never want to be called out publicly, but most coaches, if they're calling a player out publicly, the player knows it's coming, and the player, they've been told that, and he's just trying to kind of light a fire under you. So, I mean, it's important. Coaches try to get the most out of their players, like players try to get the most out of each other as well. So it's all part of the game.
I thought what was interesting in a way is it was a blanket statement too. It was on the whole team. He didn't say this player or that player, which I think would have made it different. And if you watch that game,
12 shots on goal.
yeah, it was bad. And then they came back the next night and won, even though they ended up giving up a third period lead. They did come back and get a win on the road. So to that extent, it worked. But it wasn't like calling out this player or that player. It was the whole team.
All right, Danny, like it or not, the latest from Jameis Winston.
Seems like I always get Jameis Winston, Johnny Manziel, Puig, all these guys every time I'm on the show.
You're our young hoodlum.
Yeah, I guess that's it. Yeah, I mean it's comical at this point. It's almost like what's he doing next? He's yelling in the center of the school. He's possibly signing autographs. His court case is coming back up now under Florida State. I mean, I'm all for being a kid, but this seems like a big man on campus that thinks he's invincible. And when you have a Heisman Trophy, you're not just a normal student. There comes, I said the same exact thing with Manziel. I side with him for the college kid that was in me, but also knowing that, look, you have a Heisman Trophy in one of the biggest colleges in the country. You have some certain obligations. You're just blowing it. I mean, at this point now, he's such a red flag. Granted, he's able to block out the distractions and still be undefeated. There's something to say to that. But he's got, big issues on his back, and he's got idiot written on his forehead.
How's that play in the locker room? I've heard guys ask, it says at some point, doesn't this have to have a negative impact on the team itself?
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be disappointing as a teammate, but at the same time, he's coming to perform. it's the same thing like you said with Manziel, you know, all that side attraction, but at the end of the day, he's bringing it on the field for his teammates. So, I mean, I think inside the dressing room, as long as he's bringing 100% every single night, they're going to respect him and, you know, follow his lead. But it's, at some point, I mean, enough's enough.
We haven't reached that yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll hurt him more with his teammates when he turns pro rather than right now, I believe.
Mike still number 1 in the draft?
Oh, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think because people are going to back away from him a little bit. And that's why I say this. He hasn't hurt Florida State yet. They survived the one game he sat out. But I think this is more about Jameis Winston going forward. And there was a lot of talk about him coming back next year because he thought he needed that. I honestly believe there may be a moment there with Florida State where they say, we think it's best for you to go. As great as he's been, I think especially if they get themselves and stay in the national championship. And while we're taping this, they haven't played the Notre Dame game yet. But if they go on and end up in a national championship, and then it would be...
Of course, it allows them the chance to look good, saying, you know, we kind of encouraged him to leave where he would have left anyway. They're really risking nothing.
It's just so many confusing incidences, you know, whether it's the crab legs, whether it's, you know, dressing when coach said you're not playing and he still dresses. It's just those head scratching ones that it's not like, I mean, I feel like he thought this stuff and I went, yeah, I'll do it anyway because I'm Jameis Winston. That's what scares me.
Unfinished business when we return. Welcome back to the original Rochester Press Box. It is time for our unfinished business, and we go to Danny first.
Yeah, the Sabres are rebuilding. I think this is all what we thought. And I've been a hockey fan my whole life, been a big diehard Sabres fan, and I've been fortunate enough to actually win a state title that I've already bragged about to Luke. But that being said, Sabres games for as long as I can remember for the past 10 years have always been a family event, whether it's always my mom and my dad, whether we're at a sports bar, whether or not. We're always watching the games, and for a long time we were spoiled with a pretty good product. Whether they weren't Stanley Cup bound, they were always in the playoff mix, and they were always fun to watch. And you always thought that every single game, they had a good chance of winning. Well, things are different now, and after last season, I was with my parents at a sports bar, and my mom looked at me and my dad, and she goes, how are we supposed to enjoy hockey this year? Granted, last year was the start of the rebuild, and the Sabres had only led, going to the third period, 9 times. When my mom said, how are we supposed to enjoy hockey this year? My dad simply shrugged his shoulders, laughed, and said, you enjoy it like Cubs fans enjoy baseball. You just be happy that there's hockey. This season may be rough, we're rebuilding. Understand that, take that with a grain of salt. Sabres fans, take pride in the hometown kid Brian Gianta being home. Take pride in young players. Hopefully Luke Adam gets back up there. Look at Zemgus Girgensson, Rustalainen, Sam Reinhart, Marcus Foligno. Take pride in all these things. Take the little victories like a shootout victory and go forward knowing that every single loss, Connor McDavid is one step closer. And just like Cubs fans, at the end of the day, just hope that there's greener grass on the other side.
Does that annoy you at all, playing for an organization that's playing for the next generation? Yeah, I mean, the whole it's nice to say that, and I think we all agree with it. But if you're inside again, that locker room, doesn't that annoy the heck out of you?
Well, you want to win. I mean, this
Right.
business is all about winning, and I guarantee you, every guy that's sitting in that locker room and every guy that's in Rochester sitting in our locker room, we don't want to lose games. And it's just the way the business is. I mean, you got 30 teams and it's so competitive. I mean, any given night, last place can beat first place. It's just, you know, the more it happens, you know, it's disappointing. And I'm fairly confident they'll turn it around. And like with all the players you mentioned, there's a lot of good young talent there. So it'll be a lot of fun to watch.
Good. Unfinished business.
I'm picked the Kansas City Royals to win the World Series. I'm a huge baseball fan. I'm a Detroit Tigers fan, so it's tough for me to say that in the same division. But after I've seen the way they've played, in the wild card game, coming back from that deficit in the 8th inning, and 4 out of 5 to playoff games to start, winning in extra innings. They just seem like a team set for destiny, and they got a great team all around. You look at their pitching, their speed, everything right up and down that lineup. It's a great team, and I'm picking them to win the World Series this year.
Very good. Do we believe in destiny? Is that a legitimate thing you can wrap your arms around?
I think so. I mean, you look at it's far to look back on, but you look at the Montreal Canadiens, the year they last won the Stanley Cup in '93, and I think they won. I think it was something crazy like 10 or 11 games in overtime out of 16 playoff wins to win the Stanley Cup. And you look 4 out of 5 games in extra innings to come together as a team and do that, and that much pressure and that much clutch. I mean, there's got to be something said for that.
Nicely done, Luke.
There was a survey this week that said the Denver Broncos are now America's team ahead of the Dallas Cowboys. Now, we talked a little bit about, is it good or bad for the NFL when the Dallas Cowboys are winning? I don't care what the survey says, and as much as it pains me to say, the Dallas Cowboys are still America's team. And I think the difference is, does anybody really hate the Denver Broncos? I guess if you're a Raiders fan or a Chargers fan, just within the division. People love Peyton Manning, even though he stands next to that Papa John's guy who never stops talking. But everybody loves Peyton Manning in general, and people root for him, and their games are fun to watch. But if Peyton's not in Denver,
Then you wind up with Johnny Manziel, who thought it was a great idea to roll up $20 bills like he's in a cocaine deal in a public restroom. And then, of course, we have Jameis Winston, who we've itemized all his indiscretions. At some point, and it's not in the definition of it, it's almost time for there to be a character clause in the Heisman Trophy definition, because I don't believe the Heisman Trophy has ever meant less than it does right now. Danny, thank you very much. Nice job. Mike, as always. Luke Adam, it was an extreme pleasure having you in. Let's do this again before the hockey season ends.
Yeah,
okay?
for sure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us on the original Rochester Press Box.